we're gonna be taking a look at the Olympia Cremina Express. So Olympia is a Swiss-based company that's been around since the 1920s. Initially, they solely made commercial machines, but in 1961, they decided to jump into the now bustling home espresso market, which started around 1951 or 1952 with that Gaggia Gilda. So in 1961, they began to produce their original Cremina, which was actually essentially a La Pavoni or a Piccolo. They were made in the same factory. This was their machine for the next 6 years. It wouldn't be until 1967 that the iconic Olympia Cremina Express would be created. That was a nice one. I'm gonna ask that if you have enjoyed my prior content, to go ahead and like this video before forgetting, or just, do it later. Or if you enjoy it, and hit the subscribe if you've been lurking the channel and, you wanna support me. That would be fantastic. Of course, you don't have to do that, but it would be lovely. So this was the first Cremina that I purchased. I got this back in December through my friend who is a co-editor of the Lever Fever magazine named Simone. He helped me acquire this and shipped it to me. This is a 1973 edition, so only 6 years after they began to build their machines in-house with this style. Now we fast forward 50 years, and boom, we have the 2023 Olympia. As you can see, outside of the red, it's very, very similar looking. Now, don't take a look at this. This is an addition, the Smart Espresso Profiler, that doesn't come with the machine. I included that. There's a new plunger inside that comes with this in order to read the pressure. But by and large, it looks almost identical. Now, originally, these boilers were coated with asbestos. You need to remove that asbestos for reasons I don't even need to go over. You have a simple boiler that has a heating element inside connected to the group head. Now, originally, these boilers were made of brass, and the group head and the portafilter made of chrome-plated brass. Now fast forward to today, whereas the portafilter and the group head are still made of brass, the boiler is now made of a chrome steel. So it allows for a bit more longevity, a bit easier to clean, a bit better thermal stability in the heating up process. You also had a little different steam wand back then. That has been changed. As you can see, it's a bit nicer. Granted, it's not on a ball joint, which would probably be preferred by most people, but in all reality, it does the job just fine. I'll show later in this video. You have a pressure stat in this original one, no manometer, as you can see, but a pressure stat, so it doesn't overheat. It will heat up, and once it gets to a certain pressure, it cuts the heating element off and it cools back down. Goes up and down and up and down. So as you can see, there is a lot of thermal management on the side, or the responsibility of the user. Not only that, but it's a direct lever machine, meaning there is no spring. When you lift up the piston, water floods the group head itself, and then you pull down. So it isn't an unlimited amount of water coming out. You can only brew with the amount of water that can fit inside the chamber itself. There is a common belief I see preached online about ways to increase the volume of your shot, and that is namely the Fellini Move. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Fellini Move, it comes from a movie directed by Federico Fellini, where in the background you see the barista on a spring lever machine pull down, then pull down again, and that double pump allows for a different dynamic during the shot. We won't get into it. I talk about it in my old flare video, but people have tried to apply that to direct levers. Once you pull up, if you go down some and then pull up again, that piston will unseat your puck from that reverse pressure. So think about with an AeroPress, if you're pushing down and then you lift, it stops the liquid, it sucks it back in. So the same thing will happen here. It can unseat your puck, cause a lot of channeling. So I do not recommend doing Fellini moves on a direct lever machine. machine. Instead, you can do that throw, which I linked below by Claudio, or you can just make sure you do a lot of pre-infusion before going. You can also do a smaller dose and use a thicker puck screen in order to take up the headspace to give you a creamy shot with a bigger ratio. There is a lot of belief that it is necessary to, before locking in your portafilter, to raise the lever before water comes out, then lock in your portafilter. If you lock in the portafilter with the lever down and you lift up, they say that the lack of air in there can cause the puck to unseat. There are people I've seen swear by this, saying their shots dramatically changed after they started to do this trick where you go right before the water comes out, or even a little lower than that. To be honest with you, I've not done a lot lifting before locking. The few times I've done it, I did not see a drastic change. That doesn't mean it's not there. It just means a few times I've done it, I haven't really noticed anything. But I know that there are a lot of people who kind of like swear by that as well. There are obviously different tricks in order to extend or add or optimize the amount of water that can go through your puck. One of them is simply lifting the lever up, allowing water to fill the chamber, and allowing the steam pressure, which is what's pushing out the original water, to really fill that chamber and then push through the puck itself. So a lot of people will pull the lever up, allow that head to fill with a lot of water, allow the puck to saturate, and maybe when you start seeing some espresso coming out the bottom because of that steam pressure, which is probably around 1 bar or so, then you can begin to push down. Now, once you start pushing down, you are set with however much water is in the chamber. There is another trick that I learned from my friend Claudio on his YouTube, I'll link it below, where you can change the nut right here to allow a little bit more range in the lever itself, giving you a couple more grams of potential water for a little bigger shot if you're someone into really modern style of espresso. Being a direct lever, it allows you to pressure profile however you want. You can lift up, allow the saturation, come down for some sort of like pre-infusion or saturation or whatever you want to call it, and then you can go through with like maybe a declining shot. On the newer ones, they do have a boiler manometer, so you can kind of see when it's ready, see what pressure it's at for steaming milk or if you're doing multiple shots in a row, and they do try to limit that at like 0.8 to 0.9 bars, so you can consistently get around 90 to 91 degrees Celsius. Obviously, you can get a lot hotter with this, but on the original, it had a much higher threshold for the temperature to go up. So without that manometer, it's even more of kind of flying blindly. Now, there are some modifications I've put on my 50-year-old machine here. One of them is I looped a thermoprobe through this hole surrounding the entry of the group head. I put a thermoprobe, a very thin one, onto the group head and taped it with some aluminum tape. Now, what this allows for is to read the group head temperature. Through a lot of thermal testing, I have found that the water coming out is almost identical to the temperature of the group head itself. Being that brass, it raises temperature slowly, but it holds the temperature really well. So it gives you a good idea of the water coming out. And as your shot is continuing and the water increases in temperature due to the heating element and the direct connection of the group head to the boiler itself, that temperature will rise. So it's good to have a way of understanding what temperature you're at to start your shot. I was able to put this on, siphon some of the energy from this button light right here, just inside on the very small and simple electronic panel, and I was able to pull some of the energy for that. On top of that, I have a little light to indicate where my water level is at. That's one of the biggest issues with these machines, is it's very difficult to see the water level. Some people will drop a little floater ball like a bobber that you use for fishing in there in order to see where the water level is at, but I think this is a nice, elegant solution that looks really nice. This is still gonna outlive me, I guarantee it. The way that it's built, the way that it's all put together, with simple gasket changes, lubing up the piston, with food-safe grease, and just making sure everything is working properly, this is gonna last a very long time. I bought this machine for 1,100 euros. First off, it's a collector's find, and it's something that I really wanted. And honestly, the new machines are way more expensive. I saw online people found these at garage sales, at Goodwills for 40, 50, 60 US dollars because people don't really know what they have. And it's very simple to buy them and to maintain them. The new Cremina, because of its expert craftsmanship, costs upwards of 3,700 euros. That is a lot of money for something this small. For comparison's sake, the decent espresso machine is around that price point. L'Elite Bianca, which is much bigger, has a lot more components going on inside, is cheaper than that at around 2,000 in Europe and a little bit more than that in the United States. It is a hefty price for something without real-time pressure readings. You're just kind of guessing where you're at, and without, really good thermal management. You're essentially having to manage it yourself completely. Pulling multiple shots in a row, there's no guarantee they're all at the same temperature. temperature, even if you have something like this rigged up in order to see the temperature at the group head. And there is actually a quasi-cult-like following of this company. And honestly, I can kind of understand where that price point comes at. Not only is everything built with just top-of-the-line quality, but when you look on the inside, the welding is expertly done. These people they're absolute professionals in their craft and build things that will survive for what they say on their website, a small eternity. And I believe that. I have taken this apart in order to put this new pressure reading kit, pressure sensor kit on there, which is a few $100s as well. Inside the group head and the portafilter, they made it lead free. And they've changed a lot of the components to stainless steel because, well, that's the direction most brands are moving. They found that stainless steel to be better for espresso machines for the most part. Now, holding the temperature and being like a thermal mass, brass is great. And that's actually one of the ways you're able to actually brew at a solid temperature. The water inside, the way we're getting that pressure in order for it to feed into the group head itself is because steam is moving it up. It has to go past boiling point in order to allow the water to travel up and into the chamber. When we lift this lever up, water is flooding in there. The way that happens is from the extremely high pressure inside the boiler itself. So it fills in, you have steam pre-infusion, and then when you start pushing down, you're locking in that set amount of volume inside the brew chamber itself, and you begin to go. Now, because the boiler is so hot, maybe around 115 degrees Celsius, if you were to brew with that, you'd have some really nasty coffee. This hunk of metal up here, this brass, is used to lower that temperature. Because there's no water in the brew chamber, the group head's going to be really cool. So there are actually some nice ways of heating up the group head without actually wasting any water through flushing. So I've seen that a lot of people will flush to bring water through, and obviously that will heat up the group head. But it wastes a lot of water. You have a lot less shots. They rate this tank to about 20 shots of classical espresso. Now, if you flush a lot of water, that's going to go down to like 5 shots of espresso, and then you have to refill the tank. One of the tricks is you're essentially manipulating the system that's in here. When you lift this, it starts to flood the chamber, but nothing actually is coming out yet because you've not fully unseated that plunger. So you lift it, you flood the chamber, and then you push it back into the boiler itself. And what you're doing is you're taking that boiling hot water, you're bringing it up into the group head. You're not allowing it to flood the full chamber yet, just to go through part of it. Then when you pull the lever back down, it shoots it back into the boiler. And you start a loop of bringing fresh hot water into the cool group head. You do this a few times and you're able to quickly heat up that group. I have a thermal strip on the side that shows me roughly the temperature with gradients on certain numbers to allow me to see roughly what temperature the group head is at. And so as I'm pumping, you'll see that temperature changing very quickly, just as fast as if you were flushing, but without any water waste. If you're pulling a lot of shots in a row, they do have a tendency to get too hot, especially if you're pulling darker roasted coffees. With this massive cult-like following, there are a lot of people who have made incredible modifications. And I mentioned this magazine earlier because Claudio and Simone, they both are co-editors, but in the Lever Fever, they have a full article dedicated to Cremina modifications. On top of doing something like this with a thermoprobe or throwing this little sticker on the side, there are a lot of aftermarket items that you can use to upgrade your machine, notably from Orphan Espresso and from BPlus and from Smart Espresso Profiler. You have different things that you can upgrade to, like the tamper I've been using today, but also Sworks Design with this great magnetic shot funnel. Of course, you have aftermarket things like this. You can also get these little thin billet screens that Sworks makes. Naked portafilter, which is from Smart Espresso Profiler. People who have made this massive hunk of metal with this little rubber band around it so you don't burn yourself, but you can put it up in there, twist it in like it's a portafilter, lock it in, and this will suck a lot of heat out. And this is a really great way if you're pulling a lot of shots. As you're prepping your next shot, put this in, it'll suck a lot of heat, pull it out, put it to the side, run it under cool water, whatever you want as you keep pulling shots. If you're doing 2 or 3 shots, you likely won't have that big of a temperature fluctuation. You will to an extent, but not as much as if you keep pulling and keep pulling. Other people have learned that they could just take a cool wet rag, put it on top of the group head itself, or just take the portafilter and run it under cool water. And this will help you to maintain some sort of control over the temperature. And a shout out to Doug and Barb at Orphan Espresso. They have incredible teardown videos of these old Cremina machines, and they fully supply anything that you need. So does Francesco out in Italy. He has all of the gasket seals that you can need for any year model of this. So I'll put their links below as well in case you're wanting to have a little project on a machine that will last an eternity, essentially, or a small eternity. Or a small eternity. Now, before continuing, I want to point out that this machine was sent to me on loan from Olympia. They allowed me to take this, and I asked, they said, how long do you need it? I said, it'd be great if I could have it for like 6 to 8 months. I like to really use a machine in order to understand it, especially at this price point. Now, the only reason they even considered this is because my good friend Gabor, who is the runner of Smart Espresso Profiler, he is a big lever head himself. And so when I started to acquire old vintage lever machines, I would talk to him daily about it. When I got this, he was really excited because he himself loves the Cremina. It's, like I said, he's part of that crazy cult-like following of this machine. And I was telling him how I thought it was really cool that I had one that was exactly half a century old. And I said, it would be pretty neat to compare one to one that's exactly 50 years newer. So one from this year and one from then. And he said, oh my goodness, I'll reach out to Olympia and I'll see if they'll do that. So we reached out and we had a conversation, and based off of his recommendation, they were more than happy to send me one. So I have this on loan, I'll be sending it back. Taking off the outside case is super, super, super easy as well. First, you just unscrew the water cap, and then all you have is to unscrew this big bolt, which is putting pressure from the lid to the boiler itself. And that's all that's really holding the casing on the machine. And then you have 2 grounding wires that are easy to just unplug, and then you're inside. You have just a couple of little things. You have this, which is giving you the water level right here. And again, I think it's nice when there's a light for it, but in all reality, it works just fine. And as you can see down here, the welding is just masterful. It's beautiful. I know a lot of you will appreciate that. That's like engineer porn. You have up here the manometer, so you have it reading on in here to tell you what the pressure is. Over here, you have the release for the steam. So essentially, you just have a little valve, and the steam is building up here. When you untwist, or when you twist this looser, it releases the valve and allows the steam to come directly from the top of the boiler out. And so at 1.2 bar or whatever, you have that going for you. We have the pressure stat, which is kind of controlling all of that. It's from 0.5 to 1.2 bars. But overall, it's just very, very simply built. We have minimal electronics because there's not really any need for it other than like lighting the thing up and having some other small things. But overall, this is what you have inside. And that's why I say it's a pretty big price tag for something as simple as this. But you have to take into account the mastery behind a lot of how it's built. I'll be honest, I don't think I would ever spend nearly $4,000 on this machine. Unless you're just someone that's incredibly in love with espresso and this conversation that you can have daily and something that you'll just never need to upgrade from. It is hard to justify that price. Again, that being said, a lot of these other machines at the same price point, there are going to be a lot of components you need to change out, like the pump, solenoid, all these other things you need to clean. You never need to backflush this because it's a piston machine. There's no solenoid to put detergent on. There's no real things you really need to clean other than making sure that your water is scale-free so you don't have to descale the boiler. All right, so the machine is now heated up to about 0.8, 0.9 bar. So what I'm gonna do in order to bring the temperature of the group head up rapidly is I'm gonna do what are called dry pumps, just like this. You go up just until it's about to release the liquid, and then you go back down. And what you'll see is you'll see the temperature strip quickly heat up all the way to whatever range you're wanting. I'm putting mine around 85 because I'm pulling a lighter roasted coffee. All right, let's pull a shot. So a lot of people like to bleed the steam wand into their cups in order to kind of preheat them, like so. I dump that out. So now let's get these lined up. So we're gonna start by lifting. I'm gonna start going down for a little pre-infusion. And then here comes some espresso. Now I'm gonna go to full pressure. And as I feel it eroding, I'm gonna slowly let up on the pressure for a nice declining pressure profile. Alrighty, and there we have it. So we have our 2 shots of espresso pulled very easily with some decent thermal management. Here you go, Hugo.
No, thank you.
You better not sip without a spoon. Take it. Cremina goodness.
It's impossible to make bad espresso with a Cremina.
I'm going to utilize the Smart Espresso Profiler and we'll show you my actual profile on the screen. I'm gonna pull a shot to make a cappuccino with so you can also see the steaming capabilities of the machine itself. So let me go ahead, I'm gonna prepare the coffee, we'll start pulling the shot, and then we'll see how it all goes. So I noticed that my group head is a little hot, so I'm just gonna toss this in for a couple of seconds, let it suck some of the temperature away as I get everything ready. I'm gonna put my milk pitcher in place. My portafilter's ready. Also, it's sitting out. It's cooling down a bit. I don't want to let it sit out too much. Don't want the puck to kind of aerate, but suck some heat out. This thing's nice and hot now. All right. Go ahead, toss this in. Lock it in nice and tight. And then here we go. So, we're gonna start the profile. Up for that steam pre-infusion. Start that pressure. Here we go. We keep it around here at 2.75. We're going to shoot up to 8 bar. Oops. That is an issue I have noticed, is this will tilt sometimes, which is not the greatest thing. I guess it really depends on the angle you're using it, but it has tipped a decent amount for me. I noticed that a lot of people opt to, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this right here, a little shorter shot, let it catch on the plate. All right, I know that some people have opted to hold both of these when they're pulling, but it tips a little bit for me. I know it's not supposed to, but I have experienced that. Let's get to steaming. As you saw, we had that profile up that you could see. We pulled a little shorter shot, a little less than 1 to 2 in order to give us a nice ristretto for a cappuccino. More than sufficient steam power on this. The latte art's fine. It's the first time pouring with this pitcher, and I just found out I really don't like this handle. It gets in the way of pushing. That's a delicious cappuccino. So in the end, is this machine for you? I can't say that. I know that I love the quality, I love the build of it, and honestly, it's one of my go-to machines because I just enjoy how fast it heats up, how simple it is to use. It's one switch, and it's something to really disconnect with all the technology of the modern age. But the price tag is very hefty. And in fact, because of that, my recommendation to people when they're talking about levers is to look for an older used machine. Find something for $800, $1,000, $1,500, and go with that because honestly, you're getting almost the same quality. Yes, there is a little bit of a release valve on this one that wasn't on the original. Yes, this has grounding wires. Yes, it's a little bit more safe, but in reality, you can add a lot of that stuff to this and it's gonna last just as long, and it's giving you similar quality shots. If you are someone that wants to have a budding and evolving relationship with your coffee every day, where it's not gonna be the same exact daily, but it's gonna be delicious daily, it's gonna be a fun experience, then this might be for you. I have a friend, Arthur Zietz, who runs a YouTube channel, and he has done a lot of videos with his Cremina, which is his love. He absolutely is obsessed with it. And this is a similar sentiment shared by many people. They wanted something that would never die, that doesn't need repairs, they can do it all themselves, even without any type of engineering knowledge. They're able to keep this up. There's not really any cleaning that needs to be done outside of descaling if you use pour water. But in the end, it is a wonderful machine. It's beautiful, it's compact, it is easy to use, and it gives you limitless options on pressure profiling. Of course, we've talked about some of the cons, the set water that you are having to push every time. There's a little bit of a tilt that I have noticed. I've seen in other reviews that people say it doesn't tilt, but I've found that to be very much not the case. If I'm pushing too much, or if it's a little too fine, if I'm doing a lot of pre-infusion, then ramp up, it will tilt forward. And if you try to hold it down, I mean, the machine gets blazing hot. Not as hot as like the Europiccolo, but it gets pretty hot. I'm gonna see how long I can hold it. That's about it. Steaming's fine. I wish there was a ball joint, but in the end, it's a great machine. I love my 1973. I'll be sad to give this back, but I'm just gonna take my pressure sensor kit, put it on this, and I'll keep making the same shots. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the old 1961 Cremina, the 50-year-old one, and how it stacks up to today. Honestly, the shot quality is similar, but there's obviously a difference in some of the build quality. Nowadays, they're doing some masterful work with the different metals. But in the end, I hope that you brew something tasty. And cheers.